Hello everybody, my name's Shizue, and in my last video, I started from Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and showed the characterization of Golden Freddy throughout the original 7 games. However, in the later half of my video, I would say that the name Cassidy found inside the Survival Logbook was the name of the crying child. This was because in order to find the name, you would have to use altered page numbers, so this would be the faded text helping the kid remember his name. Due to the faded text appearing red on some pages, Mike's name being crossed off in the red numbers in the Foxy Grid, I concluded that the Foxy Grid was meant to be Mike. Unsurprisingly, this was not a satisfying answer to most of you and left a lot of you confused, so I went and looked back, and to say I was wrong would be an understatement. These pages weren't just the faded text pointing out the numbers, but each page with a letter needed said my name, as in the name we were decoding was the name of the faded text, and it didn't rely only on the altered text, but also relied on Mike's multiple times in the book as well. Take this with the fact that there's 3 different input methods, that should mean each input method is meant to be one person, which left me back at the drawing board. Cassidy did exist, and they were a separate character from the crying child, leaving me stumped. But if Cassidy isn't the name of the crying child, what is the crying child's name? Well, my friend Hyperdroid actually covered his own idea a while ago, where he used the responses from the crying child to Cassidy's questions and plugging them into the Foxy Grid and reversing the letters, he got the name Dave, a name that has reappeared multiple times in the series now. When MatPat reacted to this answer, he said he actually asked Scott what the answer to the Foxy Grid was, and that Scott had refused to answer it. Had it simply been a puzzle meant to connect to the Cassidy code, something we've been reaffirmed was correct via the novels and Cassidy script, then what purpose would hiding the answer from Matt be, unless there was an answer, and Matt hadn't found it yet. I'll refer to him as Dave for the rest of the video, but names like Adam, or any of the other names that could be found potentially from the grid, are just as valid to put here as well. So we have 3 names shown in this book: Mike, spelled plainly, and someone we already knew, then Cassidy, found in the word search, the one trying to help the crying child, then the crying child, whose name is found via the Foxy Grid, Dave. But that's weird, isn't it? I mean, FNAF 6 ended off with one of the names being hidden on the graves, so we should be able to find that name inside the logbook to complete the puzzle. So why are there 2 names in this book that we've never seen before, but only one grave? This would be different if it was like Mike, where the name had been reiterated here, but neither of these names had appeared inside the games before. The only way this puzzle would work is if there was 2 blank spaces for names in FNAF 6 that you could put these names in place for. And there is. It's just not going to be the answer a lot of people want to hear. There's 2 graves obscured in Five Nights at Freddy's 6, not 1. So, if Cassidy and Dave are meant to be the names on these 2 graves, then we have a problem. Because Cassidy is meant to be Golden Freddy, and Bite Victim is meant to be Golden Freddy, where is the puppet? After all, the last time we saw a group of 6 was Happiest Day, where the puppet puts the MCI kids to rest, and Bite Victim already has confirmed connections to Golden Freddy. That would leave Cassidy, a name shredded in vagueness, to probably be the name of the puppet. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you'll watch the next video, where I explain what Glitch Trap is. What? Charlie. So I guess this is a why Charlie isn't the name of the puppet video instead, huh? Okay, so back in 2015, Five Nights at Freddy's would release a novel called The Silver Eyes, and in this story, our main character is a woman named Charlie, who's told to us to be the daughter of a man named Henry. And since HRY is introduced in Five Nights at Freddy's 6 and says his daughter was killed and possessed the puppet, that means Charlie is the name of the puppet. Or at least it would have been that way had Scott not made a post in December of 2015 where he explains that something that I should have explained very early on is that the book is not intended to solve any anything. It's not intended to be a guide for the games, or to fill in gaps. Something I said in one of the forum threads about this is that sometimes the lore of something can become so crowded that you can't tell an original story anymore. The games and books should be considered to be separate continuities, even if they do share familiar events. So yes, the book is canon, just as the games are. That doesn't mean that they are intended to fit together like two puzzle pieces. I would actually ask anyone wanting to read the book, even if they are a devout fan of the games, to read the book for the sake of enjoying the book, and don't try to solve anything. The book is a reimagining of the Five Nights at Freddy's story, and if you go in with that mindset, I think you'll really enjoy it. This means that the book took the ideas and concepts from the games and played around with them inside of the books. And while some details have made their way into the games, such as the name William Afton for the mascot killer or Henry in FNAF 6, other characters like Michael Brooks, who was introduced from the original book as Golden Freddy, are shown not to be the same character in the games. This would be doubled down when FNAF 6 would suggest Cassidy was the name of the MCI kid who possesses Bonnie, despite FNAF 6 showing Jeremy was the name of the kid possessing Bonnie. And thanks to Michael Brooks and Michael Afton debacle, we know that just because characters share names does not mean that they're the same character, even if they do occasionally share story elements. Playing through every game to date, the name Charlie has not appeared in them once, and was inferred because of Henry having a daughter in both universes. However, just like Michael Brooks, the community was meant to get the answer in the logbook, not from the novels. The other piece of evidence or claim that has become popular is that the fourth closet proves that it's her grave on the hill, but by reading the novel, the grave is described to be right next to her father's, with a fence beside it and a telephone pole behind it, which doesn't match the description of our grave in FNAF 6. Several years later, we would get a graphic novel variation, which would show us the grave again, which doesn't match either description, being shown to be below a tree and with none of the original objects beside it. If anything, this would mean Charlie's grave was the one covered by grass in FNAF 6, but there's no implication that one of the names we were meant to know here was from the novels. No statement from Scott, not anything in the games to say to look to the novels, let alone from book 1 we knew Henry was dead in his universe, yet HRY in the games was very much alive, already showing us his story had been altered. In 2023, we would get the FNAF movie, which would show characters like Garrett and Abby, the siblings of Michael Schmidt, and while Mike is likely going to be an Afton in the movies, Garrett being like Bite victim but killed differently and not being an Afton, or Abby being the sister of Mike but not matching Elizabeth beyond simple connections, should be enough to show that characters can have same roles but be completely different people. Garrett and Abby are not going to be revealed to be named Dave or Elizabeth in a future movie, because it's an alternate timeline, meant to adapt the story just like the novels. I will say it is a tad bit funny considering the FNAF community has had a distaste for the idea of the Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex stories being canon, and choosing not to use it to solve the lore. Yet very few, if any, had considered if we had done the same thing with the original novels. With Secret of the Mimic doubling down on bringing concepts over from the books without being one for one, it should have been a wake-up call that the community has been relying on the books to solve everything for them, forgetting that at its core, Five Nights at Freddy's is a game series, and people playing the games should be able to solve it by themselves. I mean, John FNAF has been pointing out how the modern games seem to be taking the stories from the original novels and retelling them in a new format, and he was right. Scott was fusing the ideas from the old novels with the story and Tales from the Pizzaplex to make a games fusion of them. The Mimic in the games, as of Secret of the Mimic, is just the Charlie Bot plotline retold in the games. MatPat finally gets his robot kid, just in the reverse way than he expected. In the files of Security Breach, we find the closest chance of Charlie being mentioned in the games, and it refers to a sticky note room. This confusion led theorists to believe that there was a Charlie virus that controlled everything inside of the games, which we now know it was just the Mimic. Which is why when I see a file named Charlie Door for a room that belongs to the Mimic, I think Charlie in question is referring to the mimic, and not the heads of Circus Baby or Nightmare On scattered around? Why name a room around a prop that has nothing to do with its purpose, versus naming it after the new character who's taking pieces from Charlie in the fourth closet? The Secret of the Mimic simply pushed theorists in the right direction, helping clarify a large portion of the timeline, and I think it's made it to where we can break the series down to a few timelines left that fit the evidence we've seen in the series so far. We were also meant to do this with Fazbear Frights, which was meant to help fill in the blanks from the older story, in which the Stingers, the main story of Frights, revolves around two characters, Andrew and Jake. Many people interpreted this to be that Jake, talking to his plushie with his dad on the other side, and was kind, this must be Dave from the games, with Andrew, the angry spirit, being Cassidy, the two spirits inside of Golden Freddy. But the Stitch Wraith never had two spirits, as following its story you would know that there was a third spirit inside of it, William Afton. Hence why every time they touched someone, they would be drained and start leaking blood. And it overlooks Jake's purpose to the narrative, as after defeating Afton, Jake goes into the ball pit from Into the Pit, which is haunted by the souls of the victims throughout all of Fazbear Frights, where he jumps in and is able to travel to those stories and alter them to allow the souls to get the ending that they deserved. This sounds exactly like what the puppet does in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, where we see her go back into the bite victim's birthday and fixes it, giving him the party he never got to have. Jake also asks many questions about Andrew's past, and Andrew isn't able to recall them, just like in the logbook where the puppet reaches out to Dave to try and remember his past. And Andrew is 1000% meant to be connected to the crying child, as a kid who's shattered amongst many characters, like I've proposed in the past about Golden Freddy possessing the other four characters, because a piece of him is in all of them, with Andrew not being able to see, just like the crying child who says he can only hear sounds in the logbook, and shown in voids throughout the games, and lastly with Andrew being the vengeful spirit who refused to let William Afton die after FNAF 6 in the books, which sounds exactly like Golden Freddy in Ultimate Custom Night. This isn't the only pattern as well, as they've pointed out that Charlie paralleling Dave's story from the novels, leaving Michael Brooks, whose entire goal is to help all the kids pass on, grabbing their memories, and word for word, he's putting them back together. And in the modern story, we have Gregory, who we all know has visual connections to Dave, talks to a bear, is a loner, and the many more connections T-Dreads mentioned in his God David video. Then Ruin, introducing the character Cassie, which is on the nose, just missing one letter, who's not vengeful, but rather concerned for her friend, and goes in trying to save him, and even feeling empathy for the animatronics, giving Chica back her voice box, putting all she can of Chica back together. Hell, the code on her Faz wrench is the same code you need to type in order to get one of the FNAF 3 minigames, the games the puppet set up. And I won't be surprised if our eventual sequel ends up showing us both Gregory and Cassie acting even more like their older counterparts. And my last point, the Cassidy script, the movie that would apparently be an encyclopedia with too much lore. Does that make much more sense to be referring to the 5th MCI kid whose only goal is to save Dave and torture William Afton, or does it make more sense for it to be one of the earliest, if not the inciting kill in the series, who tries to save all of the children and has the final game be all about her dad trying to put an end to everything, and have her be the one the movie revolves around? And this isn't everything, such as FNAF 6 giving us names for everyone but 3 characters, those names being found inside of the Survival Logbook, or how this re-clarifies and works with FNAF World. But I don't want to keep you here for too long. I hope that even if you disagree, you'll take a look back at the series and think about what all the patterns in the story are about, and how Scott's been painting his story with each new release to try and push the community on the right path. If you haven't watched it first, I would suggest watching my Golden Freddy video after this for some more context to Golden Freddy's purpose in the games, and with that, I truly do hope you'll show up for my next few uploads, like explaining who Glitch Trap is, and more to come. Remember, this was just a theory, and until next time, mata ne!